You are living in the most dangerous time in American history.
We won't take a single back step.
Former professional basketball player is now the Republican Party's choice.
Can you imagine Royce White, the U.S. Senate?
White won the endorsement on May 18th with 67% of the vote.
There's nothing that guarantees we win, but I guarantee you if we lose, we will die.
We have a very interesting guest today joining us, Mr. Richard Baris, the People's Pundit. Richard, welcome. Welcome here. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here. Now, for the audience, you're going to watch two hyper-political activists meet for the first time. I mean, for me personally, I'm reaching out to Richard Baris for help. That's what you do in politics. You try to make peer-to-peer connections, and we're all trying to help each other to maintain the republic, to strengthen our freedoms, to continue to advance the ideas that we care about. And since Richard and I haven't spoken before, oh, by the way, we were introduced to each other by a Minnesota Republican Party officer, a man named Robert Atkins. I hope he doesn't mind me using his name. I think he'll be okay with it. I want to thank Robert very much for arranging for this. I thought that was cool. I think Robert is a huge supporter of yours, Richard. He speaks of your work in the stratosphere. So he said, would you like to have Baris and Baris on? And I said, can you make that happen? Now, here's what happens in politics. People say they're going to do all kinds of things, and I never hear from them again. So when somebody actually covers, I want to give them the highest level of thank you and appreciation, because this is all about connecting the dots. And I don't know how much Richard Baris knows about David Penn, so I'm just going to give you a brief introduction, and then I'm going to turn it over to you and let everybody understand why I'm so excited to have you as a guest today. You know, you can tell I'm a little bit long in the tooth, and I have been active in politics my entire life. In fact, my mother and father were hugely influential on the left. My father was very well-known, internationally known academic. My mother was an activist attorney. If Gore had won in 2000, she would have been a federal judge. I come from a very politically involved family, and I've been all over the world and had all these experiences. And I used to ask myself, why did this happen to me? Why do I know this? Why do I know that? And then I woke up in 2020 after that election, and I flipped out. I had been doing no local politics. In fact, I almost had a disdain for local politics because I was involved nationally and internationally. And, you know, that's a real kind of false ego thing for me. And I woke up and I said, man, look, I was good at math. I looked at that math. I said, well, wait a second. This doesn't add up for me. And I jumped into action and I joined the Republican Party of Minnesota. And one of my greatest errors in my life was I went into the Republican Party of Minnesota, A, naively believing that we're all Republicans, and B, that I needed to tell people what I thought about issues because I was pissed. And I say this to all the people in my audience, I'm urging you to join the Republican Party in your neighborhood, but you don't have to argue with these people. Just show up and vote and build your own personal relationships so that we can get out the vote, because Richard is going to tell us shortly how grim it's looking in the midterms because he's looking at the data. But what happened in 2021, I joined the party. Because I have skills and I'm good in public speaking, I got a lot of things going. And I went up through the party very quickly. And then I ran into the constabulary there, and it's been a conflict for me ever since. But along the way, I decided to get involved with Royce White, who I hope you know about, candidate for Senate in 2024, running again for an empty seat in 2026. Royce is obviously a firebrand, a mega firebrand, but he's a brilliant thinker, and that matters to me because I'm a man of ideas. I like ideas. And we've decided to get together and put together this business that he owns, Free People Radio, which is really a center of American nationalist politics here in Minnesota. So we have a national platform, and I'm an up-and-comer. Actually, Richard, just to tell you, this could be my first. Are we going to go up nationally with this one, Tanner?
Yeah.
This is going to be our first nationally distributed podcast. I was discovered. I didn't even think about somebody called me and said, would you like to be on a national platform? And I said, of course I would. So you're my guest. It's great. And then most likely this will go up tomorrow night on the War Room platform, just to let you know. So this is going to get maybe 30, 35, 40,000 views. And why that's important is, and I want to say this to you, there's a lot of people that do what I do and do what you do, and they're in it for the cash.
Yeah.
And I don't have any problem if I get rich doing it because I'm not a communist. But I'm doing it for the politics and to save my republic. And I'm doing it, and I'm actually a hyperactivist organizing the state of Minnesota. That we have people all over the country watching, and I say, hey, if you're in Oregon, watch what we're doing here. Because I am constantly trying to build a grassroots organization both inside and outside the Republican Party of Minnesota, because I'm sure you know as a political analyst what's going on here in Minnesota. And, there's a lot of headwinds here. Minnesota hasn't elected a Republican to a statewide seat, I think, in 20 years. Yeah. So that's something to do also with the Republican Party. So we're trying to build something. I'm asking for help. I mean, we need insight and information and leadership from people like you that can help us make our efforts more fruitful, more efficient, more effective. I'd like to see Royce White get elected. I got other candidates I'm working with. I'd like to see our party here in Minnesota tack towards the America First idea and eschew the globalism which dominates my state, which of course, Minnesota is an ag export state. So what would you expect, right? It's Farm Belt state, like Iowa, like Senator Chuck Grassley's been there since Reagan. So we got the same kind of stuff working here in Minnesota. So I'm asking for help. And what we do here is sincere, honest. We don't backstab. We don't lie. We try to be Republicans in terms of the philosophy of republicanism, the philosophy. Like George Washington couldn't tell a lie, honest Abe Lincoln. That's what we're trying to spearhead here in Minnesota. So that's who I am and what Free People Radio is. But what we're really interested in, and what I want the audience to hear, because I'm sure a very large percentage know who you are, but more than half probably have never heard of you. That's just the way the game goes. And you have such a vibrant political philosophy, organization, and outreach. Tell everybody about what you're doing and let us know how you're proceeding and how your organization works.
So again, thanks for having me. And also, thanks for sharing that story with me about how you became, your journey from who you are and what kind of a family you came from to being a Republican, because I hear a lot of these and I very much enjoy listening to them. It's what I do. I mean, at the core of what I do is what you just did. And I'm a public opinion pollster and an election forecaster. That's how I got started. And I did gain whatever you want to call it, notoriety from being able to identify parts of the realignment with Donald Trump coming on the scene that really were going to dictate the outcome of these elections. And Minnesota has been, for people who have followed my work before, Minnesota's been a bit of a white whale for me, because Trump's version of, and I say his version, but his version of republicanism is republicanism. It's just that the Republican Party lost their way for a while, and he started to bring it back because the party was decimated after Bush left. There was no real leader, there was no real organization nationally, or in various battleground states. So he had an opportunity there to spread a different message, and that, of course, was the message of economic populism. And I think at the core of what I like to think I do is try to convey voices of people that really have no platform. They don't have interest groups who speak for them. They don't have other public pollsters like me who, are honest about the work that they do. So their voice is the one that always gets lost. And it matters because they are the majority in this country. When you look at the things that hold us together, our commonalities, we agree on a lot more than people realize. It's just that certain powers that be have to marginalize people, various groups of people. And when they do, it leaves us feeling like we have less in common, and it leaves us feeling like many of us that they don't have a voice. So, I've always been happy that I've done a good job in the Trump era compared to some of my peers, but I do at the heart of it like to think of it not that I'm trying to help a politician or a party. I want people to be heard because our society is a self-governing society. And if people don't feel heard, it's unhealthy. I mean, that's at the bottom line. I think we function better. I think we operate better when people feel like the process is working for them. And polling, like so many other institutions in this business, has been broken. The media is broken, polling is broken, and these institutions aren't working anymore as they were intended to work. So that's, at the core. Now, all pollsters have a view. And this is where I guess I differ. I'm just a little, obviously, I'm more outward, I'm more honest, more forthcoming about my own personal views. I don't think it serves anybody's interests to sit here and pretend like I don't have my own personal views and like media pollsters and others do, because I mean, you're just insulting the voter. You're insulting the intelligence of the audience. And of course, I have an outcome that I want to see. I just don't like, I don't let it interfere with my work. You can do both is what it comes down to. In Minnesota, I found your story, I got to tell you, I found your story very interesting because I feel like you just exemplified so many of the stories that I've been hearing in the Trump era, which is that eventually we went a little too far. There's an economic nationalism that spreads throughout both the right and the left. And Democrats believed that they had dominance for years to come. They believed the demographics were in their favor, and they just went a little too far, and it woke a lot of people up. And for some people, it was COVID. For others, it was the election and how it was handled. I mean, there are all of these different events that had happened. We elected Donald Trump as a nation in 2016. I'm not sure that people understood at that time what change really looked like and what it really meant. So a lot of them felt like it was a little bit too rocky for them, a little bit too turbulent, and they wanted to go back to a normal. And then that normal really came in the form of something else. And then it led again to 24, which was a bit of a wake-up call here to a lot of people. And then when you brought up, my mistake was when I, joined the local Republican Party, and I expected them to be Republicans. Minnesota's my white whale for sure. And and there's no other word. I always admired how the Minnesota Democratic Party understood that their national party had gone off the rails and basically maintained an independent entity. Sure, they're Democrats, but we're something else here. This is our own thing. And they had managed to separate that identity. And I don't wonder, I think that was probably a good idea for the Republican Party in Minnesota, which is to say that Minnesota and the Rust Belt and the Midwest, whether you're agro or you are, more manufacturing, or you're even now, I mean, you look at Pennsylvania, for instance, more mid-Atlantic, you have a different set of values. And I just don't, Donald Trump now has twice won several of these states, and actually in some cases 3 times, right? I think it's difficult for the average Republican who doesn't live in a state like Minnesota or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or Michigan to understand just how difficult it is to win these states with the voting histories that they have had. You know, you're looking at decades of the state not being not electing a Republican statewide. And yet he has come so close now. Yet he has come so he came very close in 16. And I feel like in 24, if he would have given it a little bit more attention, we would have saw an even closer result. And I'm sad that he does. But I think, I guess my point here is that I expect this from the Republican Party nationally going forward. They tend to forget about states until they get a convincing case that it's worth putting time into it. And of course, I mean, you live in the state, I don't have to tell you. There are polls every year, there's staple pollsters, and they come out and they show that the state is not very competitive. And then whether it is or it isn't, it seems like the polls always say the same thing every year. And then yet, and 24 was one of them. It ended up being a lot closer than people thought. And people look back inevitably and say, had I only known it was going to be 4 points or 2 points we should have put some resources in it. So, you know, I think that the Republican Party nationally is yet to learn that lesson about your state. But I could drone on and on. But again, that, you know, is generally what I do.
Well, thank you, Richard. If we were sitting at a coffee shop, I probably would have interrupted you 6 times. So
I'm long in the tooth too.
So no, I want to play off of this without, you know, Richard's looking at this nationally in a statistical, one thing you said, which was great. I think it's great. And you said, you know, the pollsters are, when they feign impartiality, they're insulting their customers, which are the, you know, the people that the voters that are consuming their information. You know, we're going through we're waking up as a people to the corruption of our institutions, of our media institutions. You know, I never thought about polling as an institution, but actually it is, and it's been used as a weapon, not as a source of information. And we're just waking up to that it manufactures a consensus which may or may not be real. And what I hear you saying is you're very upfront about your own political perspective, but when you do the work, you try to approach it from a scientific perspective and take aside your emotional and ideological content. And I'm watching your work, and you're a critic of what's going on because you're looking at the numbers. So you're not trying to hide what's going on. You're not what we would call a sycophant or a cultist. Right. But I do want to say, relative to Minnesota, I'm relatively new to state politics. I started in 21. And as you say, you like these stories. Well, let me give you a little bit more of my story. I'm a recovering globalist of the highest order. So I have been to China over 100 times, almost 200 times. And I was very involved there economically in a very big way in my industry, which is the tire industry. And we're still in the tire business. Before Donald Trump came down the elevator in the 16 cycle, I had decided that I wanted to pull out of China because I'd been going there since 93. And I recognized that there was things going on there that I was getting to see because of my familiarity with that culture that made me uncomfortable making the kind of money I was making. And you talk about economic populism. In the tire business, there's been an ongoing battle over tires going back to the Bush administration with what they call anti-dumping cases. So I was dealing with the United Steelworkers. And when I first met them, I thought, man, these are communists. And then I recognized, communists or not, they were drawing the line on American economic nationalism.
Yep.
And I actually, because I was raised in a very religious frame also, have empathy for the suffering of my fellow citizens. I think that's the essence of the republicanism that we're trying to get back to. When you say the Republican Party lost its way, 1946, everybody got in on globalism. And I know you know that, and that's a big part of what we've tried to cover in the previous 220 Professor Penn podcasts, where we really painstakingly go through the history of how we got into this mess that we're in right now. And I do agree with you that Donald Trump is trying to bring back a kind of republicanism, which is Abraham Lincoln's republicanism. I'm real doctrinaire republicanism, economic populism, of course, we're going to get into shortly. Well, things seem to be changing a little bit, but in terms of Donald Trump's foreign policy, et cetera, and so on, which I want to talk to you about in just a minute because it concerns me to the max. But I was involved in a globalist economic enterprise. I truncated it significantly out of a sense of patriotism, for lack of a better word. And now Donald Trump's put 25% tax on all the tires. So now if I'm buying tires from factories owned by Chinese companies, I'm actually paying down the debt. So I no longer feel like I'm putting people out of business. I no longer feel like I'm hurting people. I feel like I'm contributing to balancing the budget. So, this is the kind of thing that people really don't understand very well, the economics of what's going on. Because if you're not in the game, if you're not in that ring every day, international trade, it's kind of a mystery to you. But what you said about Minnesota, when I got involved in politics here, the state was a mystery to me. I just thought, wow, we're going to support the Constitution and the Republic. And I ran right into a Republican Party that is, deeply collaborative with the Democrat Party here. And that is deeper than politics. That goes into the culture of Minnesota, what they call Minnesota nice.
Yeah.
We're a consensus-seeking culture. It's been called Yante culture.
Yeah.
And the Republicans are very loath to take a position which could be criticized as nonconformist. And so our state has been sliding left since Wendell Anderson. It was actually a Republican state. And just to tell you about my parents, to let you know how deeply wound into this thing I am, the center of the leftism here in Minnesota is the University of Minnesota. I actually sat in a room in 1969 after McCarthy lost to Humphrey and then Humphrey lost to Nixon. And I sat in a room with a bunch of academics as a 11-year-old kid and watched these academics make a 50-year plan to turn the state basically communist. They didn't think about it as communist at that time. There were a lot of Jewish intellectuals is what they were, with some Yante Lutherans thrown in for good measure. So everybody got together and they made a plan.
That'll do it.
Well, they made a plan to take over the university through the tenure process. And so the university has been, spinning out generation after generation of leftist-orientated graduates who have then spread out through the state and right down to the kindergarten level. We have a big challenge in front of us because that leftism is wound into the educational system of our state. And so I've got a bird's eye view of how this thing went down. I don't have 50 years. So I want to talk to you about like a 10-year plan that we could, I'm still viable because I'm still full of piss and vinegar. And I want to give everything I've got because I love the Republic and I love the founding documents when we've painstakingly gone through them here on this podcast. But the one line, a creator that grants unalienable rights, that for me, that's the game right there for me personally. And I want all my fellow citizens in Minnesota to have at least the chance to discover that. So what we're doing in Minnesota now is we're trying to get Royce elected. And you said just as we're going on, do you know Royce personally?
I don't know him personally, but I do know who he is, of course. Anytime you're going to be a candidate, especially for any major statewide office, I'm probably going to hear your name, especially in a state where I'm paying attention and I'm going to be watching because I think that, you said, give me a 10-year plan. I don't have 50 years. I think Minnesota got left out of some of that, what other states had, a couple of years ahead of you guys said, I'm going to need a plan too. And I think Minnesota got left out because Republicans haven't yet allowed themselves to fully believe that the state is flippable. I mean, I don't know why. We've seen several close calls. And I think that when it comes down to it, of course, there has to be some level of persuasion, and people have to believe you when you say, this is what I believe in, this is what I'm running on, because this is the policy that I'm going to pursue. This is the agenda I'm going to pursue. I'm still very much a believer that people make rational policy choices, even if sometimes they may not appear to arrive at that decision in a rational way. It still is a rational choice. And I think that Minnesota has, first and foremost, motivation. There is a level of persuasion, but this is a game of motivation at this point. And we have a lot of people who've been orphaned in the process. And when you look at 24 and you look at the states surrounding you, whether it's Wisconsin, Michigan did. I know I worked with a group that put a lot of effort into this. And even Musk and others, they had, of course, efforts in Pennsylvania. You had Turning Point, very much focused on Arizona, and some in Wisconsin. But there are a lot of voters who went through the same transition that you just described to listeners, yet they maybe weren't political in nature, or certainly didn't have political family. And they were just basically orphaned from the process. Maybe when they were growing up, they thought, my family voted Democrat, and then we call it ancestral voting history. That maybe they thought my family voted Democrat, but I don't think they voted for this kind of a Democratic Party, and I'm basically just going to be disconnected from the political process. There are a lot more people in who that describes than most political analysts understand, and certainly most political campaigns understand. So for a long time, this isn't new. It just seemed that in 24 it started to actually sink in to some people. The name of the game is to change the electorate and not just try to persuade it, because what those academics that you sat in the room with 50 years ago, what they tried to do wasn't convince the voters of Minnesota at that time that they were right. They convinced each other that we can make a plan to change who it is that will eventually be voting. And I'm saying there's actually a way for Republicans to do that, and it's not going to take 50 years of indoctrination. There are people who are out.
Can I just interrupt you, just because now we are at the coffee shop, and I have a question. So I'm sure you know who Dan Schultz is and the precinct strategy.
Yeah.
And when I got involved in politics here in Minnesota, what I believe was my role as a party officer was to build out the party infrastructure down to the precinct level so we could get out the vote, and so that we could form a community of Republicans. And of course, my chair at the time shut that down. And I said, why would you do that? And his answer was, we don't need any more Republicans. We just need more work from the Republicans we already have. And I was so naive, I did not recognize that that was a power consolidation, protect process. Now I understand it, but I didn't at the time. And what I'm trying to do here in Minnesota, and we're getting better at it, when I went into the process, nobody knew each other. I'm talking about the activists throughout the state. We didn't even know each other's names because the party kept us separated into the little cantons called Senate districts. And we broke that down. I mean, the activists, this kind of media that I'm doing, and of course what you're doing at a national level, and we're national, but we're really focused on Minnesota. Sorry, my audience, if you're in Tennessee, we're just a model for you. I mean, you got to have a master model of somebody that's willing to go anywhere, any place, anytime to talk to anybody about anything. That's who you're talking to, Richard. That's what I do. So, I mean, I'm just at that point that I've just lost it. I mean, I've lost all sense of normalcy. I've given over to this process that you're starting to allude to. And I'm going to ask you, what do you mean? Because I'm starting that out by saying what I'm doing is trying to build out the Republican Party at the precinct level that the party itself will not do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that that is the case, but the story again that you just told is one I've heard in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It's one I've heard in Eastern North Carolina. It's one I've heard in Southeastern Pennsylvania and Northeastern Pennsylvania. It was The first time, I think, and I know there are others, and there were names, of course, attached to the idea of the precinct strategy. After 2020, a lot of people woke up and realized, after years of people like me trying to tell them, it really did fall on deaf ears, that a lot of this local, I mean, we all focus on the national, but the local stuff is where a lot of levers of government, are pulled. And if you're not there, you can't count a vote. Honestly, you can't get a vote out. Honestly, you can't register to vote efficiently. So, if you don't have enough people at the local level and you don't have enough people in the places where they need to be, you could be in a red county, and I guarantee you, there's a blue clerk counting your votes because they're not out there doing that work. And it was unfortunate that the people who were there, decided, when there was this influx of people for the precinct strategy, they decided not to welcome them with open arms, but instead with a guarded mentality that they're coming for what's mine. And that is very unfortunate. But everybody who tried to get involved in the precinct strategy ran into that. And it certainly stymied any effort that would have contributed to to what the goal of that was. And so what we did in 24 was an attempt to just get around them and get around all of this. And we did a lot of research on how to bring out or change these orphan voters. And it's something I could get into. I'm not sure we have enough time, but what we found is that, and this shouldn't have surprised anybody, these voters are very decentralized in their thinking. They actually don't react well to outsiders. So the idea of a party knocking on doors or trying to, it actually didn't work that well for them. The best way was for personal family, personal friends, coworkers, like-minded people, even gamer groups. I mean, these are things we used. People have gaming communities. It's unbelievable, but you would be surprised how many economic nationalists or populists, however you want to characterize them, that lean to the right. You would be surprised how many were sitting on very well-known video games and on Discords, and basically we use those communities and we use those relationships to convince them that their votes mattered, and that was the hardest part about this effort. And the AP made fun of us, and CNN made fun of us, and they joked and they said, look at what some of these, Trump supporting groups are trying to do in states like Michigan. It's ridiculous. Nobody ever gets out these voters. Hunters, Minnesota. I know that you've probably heard of people like Scott Pressler and others. I think that often some of these influencer types, they do embellish some of the numbers, but it's another excellent point, another excellent community. And by the way, Don Jr. understands this. He did understand it in Minnesota. He just didn't get any support for it, unfortunately, years ago. But hunters are another community. They certainly lean toward our views. It's just that they are, going on with their lives. The hardest thing is to convince them that their vote still matters, still counts. And I mean, I know this is kind of opening the door to so much other conversation, but we found that you had to motivate those low propensity and even orphan voters, no propensity voters, in order to change the makeup of the state. And that's any part of a plan to win Minnesota. I really truly believe would have to include something like that, because you have the Twin Cities behemoth that you have to contend with. And there's another side, of course, to that, because minimizing the vote share in those areas, that's a whole other conversation. I think the way you do that is just to be honest with people and be honest with voters. But I'll digress.
Richard, let me just go back over a couple things, but let me start with the last one first. Then I want to go back to the RNC relative to party politics. So don't let me forget, Tanner.
Yeah. Okay.
By the way, good morning, Tanner.
Good morning.
Tanner's part of our show here, Richard. He's a great person to have on. He's young. We've got him going in politics, and he's very intelligent, and he comments. And if you have a comment or a question, break right in, young man. I wanted to just say relative, you said something that's so critical to me personally, because I talked about my parents. My father was deeply involved in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And he actually participated in starting a Black Studies department at the University of Minnesota. So unlike a lot of the suburban Republicans, and I was also heavily involved in athletics growing up, so I've spent a lot of time for lack of a better way of saying it, in the black community. I'm not afraid of black people.
Yeah.
Like, for example, in the last cycle in 24, I wanted to go door knock in Minneapolis, right in the inner city. I can only get 4 people, me and 3 other people, to go into to lit drop. We weren't even door knocking. We were just lit dropping. And Republicans would say to me, "Oh, I'm not going there. Why not? Oh, I'm afraid. It's not safe." What do you mean it's not safe? It's 12 o'clock in the afternoon. No, I'm not doing it. So what I'm saying to you, Richard, is that the Republican Party of Minnesota, going back 30, 40 years, has absolutely abandoned millions of our fellow citizens to the depravity of a growing communism in the core cities. And I'm not willing to accept that. And that really underscores my support for Royce White because, he swears when when he's in a public setting, he doesn't swear. He's very affable and likable. If he's in front of 200 people, who's that guy? But people don't understand that when he's podcasting or when you're podcasting, there is an entertainment element to this. And the audience that he's seeking is not a 75-year-old person living in a wealthy suburb with a $3 million house paid for and $40 million in their 401k. That's not his audience. And that person's going to vote Republican that's a whole other thing, how those people are voting. But there's nobody really going into the inner city. And what Royce is doing, he's coaching basketball, multiple teams, meeting parents, taking young kids. You're talking about alternative ways to convert or to motivate or to energize low propensity voters, no propensity voters, or long-term ancestral leftist voters.
Right.
He's actually, and the party doesn't even recognize what he's doing. They don't recognize that he's building a political constituency using the culture. He's part of that culture. He's criticized for that. But I'm just telling you that outreach, Free People Radio is deeply involved in trying to reach what I think is the low-hanging fruit, which is the obvious constituencies that are forming of people who understand that the Democrat promise was a scam. And we're speaking to those people. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do here. And we need help with that to understand what issues. I mean, Royce probably wouldn't say that, but I'm saying myself, because I'm not running for office. I'm an advisor and I'm trying to do the work. What are the unifying issues that we can create new constituencies with? And before you answer that, I also want to say that the precinct strategy, the point of it for me, if we can't win in Minnesota for a certain period of time, what we want to do is change our party so we can elect 3 American nationalist RNC members, because right now, we sometimes send people to the RNC that are not really down with the quote-unquote Trump agenda, which it's not even the Trump agenda, it's Republicanism. So, we want to have a party, we want to remove the people that are blocking the build-out of the party. And they're blocking it very systematically. So that's why I believe we need a huge influx of people into the party, and that's why I'm urging people to go to caucus. We're still a caucus state here in 2026, and join the party. And I will meet you and I'll help you understand how party politics and party procedure works so that we can organize, not that we're against anybody. We're for citizen participation. And in this sense, I'm like you. I have a perspective. I know who I am politically. But when I'm working to bring people in the Republican Party of Minnesota, I'm not vetting them out. If you want to come into party politics, come on in, get a vote, get a seat at the table. Let the citizens vote it out. But please don't leave half of the billets empty, because then it's not really a political process. It's an insider game. So we're trying to change that party politics, but going back to those unifying issues, you as a pollster could give me so much help to know what I should be focused on.
It's funny because going into, for instance, you have a neighboring state that obviously Michigan, one of your, Great Lakes states, and In Wayne County alone, which I'm listening because I was listening to the story and I was inside chuckling or trying not to chuckle out loud because I've seen this a lot as well, where newcomers to the party or even, I mean, they're not, some aren't so new anymore, which is why you'd be surprised there hasn't been so much more progress made in this area. But, you're willing to go in any neighborhood and you're willing to knock on any door. And look at Wayne County, for instance. I mean, had Mike Rogers at the Senate level done as well as the presidential candidate in Wayne County, we may have been looking at another Republican seat in the U.S. Senate. But, he very much ran a very typical established Republican establishment campaign. He did not seek out those votes. Donald Trump did much better with black voters than he did. Mike Rogers did well with some other non-white groups, but he didn't do as well. He ran about 10 points, 7 points with Hispanics, 10 points with black voters. So, that could, in a very close election, that could make the winner the loss. And in the case of Mike Rogers, it did. Meanwhile, if you would have gone to those neighborhoods and knocked on those doors, I think a lot of Republicans who have been part of the party for a while might be surprised to find out that a lot of the issues that motivate the new right, and especially the younger right, are the same issues that motivate people in inner city America and in urban America. And I want to say this before we actually get into specific issues. I wanted to just briefly mention that I have been arguing for whatever you want to call it, bridging the urban-rural divide through these issues for years, because for years, decades now, it's been American politics and electoral politics been a fight between, you have your rural coalitions and you have your urban coalitions, and then they're fighting over the suburbs to see who can win enough, to carry the day. And it leaves the suburb as the most important voting block, basically, because you figure the rurals are going to vote how they're going to vote. The urban voters are going to vote how they're going to vote. So everybody focuses on the suburbs. And there's a couple of problems with that. First and foremost, that the suburbs actually have unique issues, or unique perspective that allows, like, when you're focusing and you're tailoring your message to them, you can leave out large numbers of people in urban and rural America. So it's not healthy for our politics to do this. And then secondly, if we did begin to narrow the gap between urban and rural America, it just makes for a more unifying society, right? We're not going to be so polarized and balkanized. So it's not only a good political strategy, it's good politics in the sense that it will lead to a more stable society. That being all said, instead of finding the things that we differ on, or entertaining this system that does separate us, when you go and you knock on those doors in urban Black America, for instance, you're going to find a lot of mothers and a lot of mothers who are upset that maybe illegal immigration is putting so much burden on the social systems, the social welfare, education, healthcare. It's putting so much burden on them that they're the ones who suffer a great deal because of it. There were a lot of stories in New York City and other urban areas leading up to last year's election where, when these people came in and the government didn't know where to put them, they get dumped into the interior, which is unfortunate in and of itself. But a lot of the people who suffered from that were minority school districts who used their schools to house these people. And it was very disrupting to the families in those neighborhoods. You'll find men who wish there was just more economic activity. I mean, we have this very bleak and dark picture. Let's be honest. I mean, this is not a huge deal everywhere, but it is in certain parts of the Republican Party where they have a very, dark view. They don't know other communities very well because they have excluded them from their political process for so long. And they have this very bleak view, and they think, that if you go to inner city, all you're going to find are people who want to be on welfare. And, these are just horrible stereotypes that aren't true. And if you are somebody like a Trump benefited because he's got universal name recognition. So his message is his message, but he did lead the way. What did he do? He went into the Lion's Den and he spoke with the Association of Black Journalists. He knew it was going to be an adversarial crowd, but he did it anyway. And he was trying to make a point. I'm not saying you're going to be welcomed with open arms in these communities, but I am saying that you're going to find a lot of kinship with them on these certain issues. And that's why economic nationalism really is the secret. It is between immigration, trade, putting American industry and American jobs first. That is an 80-20 issue everywhere in this country, right? I mean, we have polled the most hardcore liberals, and even they will tell you that, American trade policy, U.S. trade policy should not be designed to benefit the welfare of another nation over American employees.
Well, let me just interrupt for a second and say,
and this from your
I was just going to say, as a reformed globalist, when I was a full-throated globalist, the criticism of what I was doing really was led by Chuck Schumer. It was led by the Democrats. That's right. And they were the ones that were all in on globalism. They were just using it. I mean, now that I look back on it, I realize how deeply duplicitous these people are.
Very, yes.
Because they're, and there was an alliance between this kind of, what did you call establishment, a traditional Republican campaign, because empire is about the U.S. dollar, which is about trade. And that's so, right. You get into my age cohort has never seen an intervention going back to Vietnam that we didn't say, well, that's not true. Vietnam, we were in the streets. And I was looking at your recent comments about the young cohort of Trump supporters that have completely flipped since the intervention in Iran, which I want to get to. I want to transition into some really core elements so the audience understands and try to find a way out of this. But we were anti-war. That was the coalition that worked at that time. But after that, and I personally, in my own poetic musings, think that the 4 assassinations in the 60s, which I call the 4 martyrs, Kennedy, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Robert. I think those 4 assassinations took my age cohort and scared us like sheep. Like if you have an opinion and you're standing up against power, you're going to die. And then Nixon financialized their economy, and it was glorious to get rich. So everybody, because we were a very idealistic generation when we were when we were at square one, we were hippies. Man, this was a generation of people that wanted intense change, and we were anti-war. Now, I've always been anti-war, but we were anti-war. And then after Nixon, man, my group, everybody was just trying to make money. Nobody thought about their fellow citizens. It was all about me, 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 me. Very self-serving group, my cohort. And we've never seen an intervention we didn't want to get involved in. So now we roll into this Israel thing, and I'm just going to talk about Minnesota. We've got traditional Republicans, establishment Republican, empire-supporting Republicans that see America as the hegemon, that are bought into the idea of America as the world's policeman, and that our version of political economy is the end of history, for lack of a better way of saying it. We've got Christians United for Israel, evangelicals in this state, deeply committed to Israel, deeply. So that's a coalition, because that establishment Republican base, there's now a profile of a national candidate that they're looking for. In fact, I've heard it called the SEAL brand, where they're really looking, and the Democrats are looking for the same thing. Ex-military, that are going to promote a certain kind of Americana, and they're allied with evangelicals. I mean, that is really not, this is the fight in the Republican Party here in Minnesota, and probably in every state in the nation. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, and they're trying to find one for Senator Tom Tillis's seat in North Carolina. He'll be not seeking re-election, and there are some good people who could step up and do that, and they're looking for that type as well. One of them is a Green Beret. And I'll just say this. There are things that the Democratic Party can get away with that the Republican Party cannot, because these demographics that we're talking about going out to get and changing the electorate, to bring them over, make and turn them into core voting groups. They are ancestral democratic voting groups. It is so. So what does that mean? They're used to they and their families are used to voting Democrat. It is not. It's not hard for a Democrat to do something that's uncharacteristic, or the Democratic candidate to be something a little bit uncharacteristic of what they're used to, but still get their votes. When you're trying to change somebody's political affiliation, you don't have that luxury. So I'll just say this, and I'm not going to equivocate at all. The Seal brand is a loser. It's a loser because the very voters that you're trying to bring over are voters who are very much anti-war, like you are, like you just said you are. And by the way, myself, I am personally, and I am a veteran. It's just the older I get, the less I tolerate or like war. Because the older we get, we also live through the outcomes of these conflicts, and the facts, or what were presented to us as facts, always either change or evaporate later. So you just learn as you get older and wiser that you really just can't take their word for anything. But as far as it as a policy, when you're going into these areas, and let's go back to the urban voter for a second, Democrats can do what they want because they are the devil they know already. You're the devil they don't know, and you have to get them on board. You have to be something better than the devil they know. So they don't like intervention. When you bomb Iran and a pollster goes into the field and says, did you support bombing Iran to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon? Of course they're going to tell the pollster, yes, yeah, sure. Do they, as a matter of policy, think that the United States should be the arbiter of who does and who does not get to defend themselves or have nuclear weapons around the world? What role do they believe the U.S. has in the Middle East and other areas of the world? Is a totally different story. Americans have no more appetite for conflict. They don't want even limited conflicts because they worry about escalation. These groups couldn't care less what Israel's problem is or what their latest threat is to their own existence. They don't care. They're worried about the threat to their existence at home.
Richard, give me 1 second. Tanner, I want you to timestamp this where we started talking about this issue about the Seal brand. I want you to clip it. I'm going to send it to all the party elders that I strive with here in Minnesota, because that's a very, coming from you as a noted pollster of high integrity. This is a trap that I think this is a trap that we're falling into in the party, and I looked at your polling and your commentary on these younger voters that are the most recent converts to, I don't want to call it Trumpism. I'm not big on labels. They just didn't want to vote Democrat. They came into the coalition to elect Donald Trump. I don't know what's in their heads. I mean, in total.
I think it is fair. I think it is fair to call them MAGA. I think MAGA got a bad name in the media, but it does, because there's MAGA and there's even MAHA, and I was stunned by how powerful the Make America Healthy Again message really was until we studied it before the election. But it was extremely powerful, especially with young people. But young people in the 18 to 29 demographic we thought, we were skeptics. These kids grew up, and I don't mean to put anybody down. I'm just getting older now, folks. So I don't mean kids, but kids. But they grew up with their parents being lied to about COVID. They grew up with maybe they themselves were lied to about COVID. The aftermath of recessions and wars and just one foolish policy after another. They basically have PTSD from what's been done to them. It's really remarkable that anybody was surprised that they would like somebody like Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump ran way ahead of Republicans all around the country among this age group. And coming out of 24, every Republican Party, whether it was Minnesota or Ohio, even though they think that it's a red state now, I would argue if the Republican Party goes back to being the pre-Trump Republican Party, they'll lose states like Ohio again. It's not that red. It's a type of red, a very certain type of red, a populist red, an economic nationalist red. It's not it's not it's not Bush red. I mean, I don't know how to lack of a better phrase. And Bush certainly does serve as a brand of republicanism that fits that SEAL type, right? Dan Crenshaw kind of candidate, Tom Cotton kind of candidate. Tom's a very nice guy, but he would not win a national election. There's a mold there that they're looking for that is couldn't be more opposite of what the Republican Party really needs going forward. And just to say this for people who are kind of wondering what we're referring to, the 18 to 29 group, when Donald Trump began to decline over the first 100-day period, and he did not decline as some other pollsters found, but he was falling, and then he was very high during his honeymoon period, so that shouldn't be surprising. But there were certain groups that were keeping him propped up, and some of them 18 to 29. Black men under 45, Hispanic men overall. These groups that we are not used to, we have not grown accustomed to labeling as Republican voting groups or supportive demographic groups. And they were holding him up. The minute he bombed Iran, they took off. 18 to 29-year-olds started to turn, and I don't want to say turn, but they started to say, I disapprove of the job he's doing. And we would ask them point blank about the bombing of Iran. We know it was that started this. And then as time went on, it's painting a much more clearer picture. After he took that intervention in Iran, even though it was a very limited, as they want us to believe, a limited intervention, a limited action, there was an increase among support among voters he doesn't get and will never get. The rich, highly educated, upper crust, I don't want to say suburbanite, but typically what we associate with a white liberal, a very rich white liberal, or an old school kind of Bill Kristol Republican. That's the voting group that said, yes, I'm happy about the bombing of Iran's nuclear sites. And oh, by the way, I even somewhat approve of Donald Trump now. And my argument is simple, and it's this. In a couple weeks, those groups will be gone again. They'll be right back to hating Donald Trump, and they'll be right back to disapproving of the agenda items and doing everything they have been doing for the last 10 years. And the only thing that you're going to have remaining is a weakened base. 18 to 29-year-olds that supported you are going to be hard to win back. They're skeptical people. You can't burn these people, especially since they're so new to the coalition. So, I mean, I know I just said a lot. It's a lot to take in.
This is great. Because I really want to up my game and be politically effective. You can run around. I mean, there's a difference between activity and productivity. I'm not interested in being active. I want to be productive. And this thing you're talking about is critical to me. And just to, from the poetic frame, as I was driving into the studio this morning, I was listening to Morning Joe on MSNBC. And here's what I heard them doing. They were using Donald Trump's stance on the Epstein files to substantiate that it was always a conspiracy theory and that, MAGA was always, flying in the wind on this deal with the deep state. So they were actually using Donald Trump's stance to justify their position. So now Donald Trump is in league with Morning Mika and Morning Joe. And then they had the next person on, and they were touting, it actually was Senator Richard Blumenthal, because now Trump has given Putin 50 days and he's going to let this sanction bill, or he's threatening with these tremendous secondary sanctions. I mean, really, this is how you start a world war, actually. And Blumenthal was singing Trump's praises. So when you got Richard Blumenthal, senator from Connecticut, who is he's the anti-Trump. And all of a sudden they're palsies. There's trouble in River City in the coalition for sure, which I think is what you're talking about. So I don't know if you want to talk about this from a pollster frame or from a political analyst frame. What do you think is going on? I mean, can we even speculate about what's going on here? Do you have some, because I'm going to tell you, my perspective has been, I'm slow to judge until I see the punchline. But
Yeah.
I'm getting close to a punchline. And as I said, and I say this on my podcast, I'm not a Donald Trump fan. I'm not motivated by people. I'm motivated by ideas. That's just me. And I tell my audience,
Right.
if you love Donald Trump, I'm not against that. I'm into the idea. And all of a sudden, I'm watching a rather neocon foreign policy emerge, which is no different than anything that I've seen going back to Gulf War I. It's the same to me. Am I wrong to say that?
Look, and then maybe I should have used this or saved this label for this response, because the truth is, if you support Donald Trump, being a sycophant and clapping along like a seal is not the way to ensure he's successful. You, for once, have a president who does listen to his base. He cares what they think, and he responds. Now, what I saw yesterday on Truth was a line I really never thought he would cross. He did, and he'll have to deal with the consequences of that, and there will be. But if you do support Donald Trump, and many, I mean, the funny thing is, many of the people who are being critical right now have been on with Donald Trump from the beginning and were among his strongest supporters before any of these yes men came along before. And I mean that by people who support him surrogacy, but also in the administration. So, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, to deny that there's not a problem right now in MAGA is a level of sycophancy I can't entertain. I just don't. I personally cannot get there.
We're not cultists after all.
That's it. And I think I was getting there, actually, that the media for years have called MAGA a cult. And in truth, the last 3 to 4 weeks have proved that MAGA, in fact, is not a cult. And there are always going to be yes men who, are basically competing and falling over each other to be the biggest sycophant out of all of them. But I saw this movie during the first Trump administration, and so did a lot of other voters, his core voters. And this is what is concerning them now. When they see mistakes, they feel that they can point them out. When they didn't in the first administration, things took a very bad turn, and they denied him a presidency by outmaneuvering him. I mean, if we're being honest, we really have to be unafraid to say the truth. There were too many people who told everybody to trust the plan and trust the president, and they trusted themselves right into a special counsel, which destroyed his presidency. Then later, after he shook off the yoke of the special counsel, the COVID came, and it was trust him on this and trust that, and people trusted themselves into the complete undoing of our electoral process, and it cost him his consecutive second term. So you cannot blame the core group of MAGA for now sitting and looking at what is going on, whether it is foreign policy or these sanctions with Russia. Because the sanctions, of course, Richard Blumenthal wants them. It's going to drive the price of gas through the moon. And then Richard Blumenthal can blame Donald Trump for higher gas prices. Of course he won't. Plus, there obviously is a bipartisan consensus on war.
85 senators.
They want it.
85 senators have co-sponsored that bill, including.
There you go.
I mean, 85.
Now you can't get that agreement on anything,
right? Well,
Professor Penn.
No. They agree on $4 trillion a year. We have broad bipartisan consensus, which is the military-industrial complex and its research, and the medical-industrial complex and its research, and that's the 100%. Core and the extremism. We just had political assassinations here in Minnesota, which I know you're aware of recently.
I am.
That extremism is born of that consensus. It's driving people mad.
Yes.
Because that medical system is not responsive as it needs to be for that kind of money. And we just can say that easily. We have the highest spend on healthcare, and we have a very low longevity outcome compared to peer countries. And then, on the military side, MAGA is we don't want an empire. I mean, that's right. That's the deconstruction of empire, or the the voluntary pullback from our deployment all over the world. So, and I just got to tell you this because this is hilarious, because these people are, unlike you and me, they're without any shame. We have a very leftist newspaper here, which is the newspaper of record in Minnesota. It's called the Minneapolis Star-Tribune.
Tribune, yeah.
And I was reading today about their coverage of the Epstein files on the front page, and guess who they quoted as a. This is hilarious. They actually quoted Alex Jones at great length to talk about the mega coalition falling apart. I mean, to see Alex Jones's name on the front page of that newspaper just shows me how deeply disingenuous these people are. Because Alex Jones is, of course, persona non grata.
Of course.
But now he's our source. It's just hilarious.
I would keep that newspaper for for my memorabilia collection, which I have one of. I see something that's remarkable, obviously, the fight picture. But when I do events, and I go speak here or there, or I see, political events or gatherings that I think are going to be big, I try to keep. That would be one of these. I would see the cover of that and I would keep it, because that is very revealing, Professor Penn. If you look at what they're doing, they would never cite Alex Jones ever, but they're using Alex Jones to serve their own purposes, to serve their own ends, which is to drive a wedge. Listen, I mean, the real sin here may have been with the whole Epstein, and I know that's I'm sure, right, that had to do with the Epstein files. I think the real situation here with Epstein is that it's a proxy issue for holding the rich and the powerful and the unaccountable accountable. It's a proxy issue for the us versus them, the globalists versus nationalists, and there's nobody in their right mind. And when you stop the sycophants, when you tune them out, when you have an honest discussion, there's nobody worth their weight in this business who would argue that they did not mishandle that entire situation. And making it worse is, wasn't inevitable, but they're making it worse by simply refusing to acknowledge that they did mishandle it. The amount of leeway that voters give to the president is something that a guy like me, who's been doing this a long time, you don't see it often. And voters, they tire of political figures and men very quickly. They give him a lot of love and a lot of grace and a lot of latitude. And the only way that he can damage that relationship is it's himself. The media can't do it. The late Rush Limbaugh was very right about this. However, the last couple of Truth Social posts in response to this, that's to me, it's the first time I've ever seen Trump say or write or do anything that could jeopardize that relationship. And that's problematic for anybody's effort like the one that you were detailing before in Minnesota and in other places around the country where, Republicans are trying to build a new coalition and move forward. And by the way, Minnesota is doable. It is. But this is the worst possible thing that anyone can hope to see that may be engaging in an effort like this, because he is the symbol, unfortunately. And I'm like you. I'm uncomfortable with the idea of idolizing men and following men like that. Men are fallible and flawed. Ideas are not. in the purest form, right? So I think that he can right this ship.
How?
But he's got to do it soon.
How? I just would what from a pollster's perspective and from your political acumen, since he's put himself really in a corner, what's his move?
Yes.
Does he have a move out of this thing?
He does. He's got to do big things. And I know he's not the kind of guy who likes to, apologize. That's not happening. But you can have, a Mia Khalifa, sister soldier kind of Bill Clinton moment. You need to do big things to show people that you are committed to holding people accountable. And there are some things I know and I have heard about, and we'll see if they materialize or result in anything. But, going after the bad actors who honestly committed either frauds or horrible crimes against the American public would be a great place to start. They're out there. You mentioned it before. I mean, the two complexes that Americans cannot stand and that probably take the most from them are the big pharma complex and the military complex, and those are good places to start. And then in the last poll that we just put out, the theme of the poll is the voters think Donald Trump has somehow gotten distracted, and he was not elected to do these things, right? To protect Israel from a threat, to start a war with Russia. They very clearly voted for him to de-escalate the war, the Russo-Ukrainian war. And they wanted him to fix inflation and immigration. And immigration, he really does have a lot to tout. A lot of this comes from his own. It's not disciplined. His messaging in the White House is not disciplined. When they have great achievements, they step on them. They have to stop doing that, because a lot of times when I argue this and answer questions, people will say, but he did do things. He did do this. He did do that. A big problem with the Biden White House was their communications as well. It was horrible. And every time they had a win, a political win that they could tout, they stepped on their own win. Trump is doing the very same thing. Folks, the best wage growth in 60 years, we had a report, and it was completely overshadowed because Trump bombed Iran's nuclear sites, and nobody cared or talked about it. It got lost in the coverage. And I'm a gym guy. I go to the gym and I try, to work out for an hour or two every day. And there's screens, Professor Penn, all over the gym. And when I'm working out, I'm still doing my job and watching everything from MSNBC, CNN to Fox, local stuff. It's all up there. There wasn't a single screen about better jobs data, about better wage data. It was all about Iran. And I'm listening to people on the treadmills, on the various machines. I'm listening to them talk about the news on the screens. It was completely dominated by an unpopular intervention. Whether it was brief or not is irrelevant. That's not what they wanted. They were not prioritizing that movement, and it wasn't something that he argued he would do. And then fast forward, it was just the anniversary of an unsuccessful attempt to assassinate him. You brought up before 4 assassinations that are still burnt into your psyche from your generation. I 100% agree with you. I think those assassinations are key to understanding the voters of your generation. And we just had that. It should have been a great day of celebration. And thank God he was spared. Look at all the great work he's done until that. And instead, it wasn't. It was about the mishandling of Epstein, him trying to justify it and putting True Social posts up telling his voters he doesn't even want their support anymore. I mean, they are their worst enemies at this point. And it really is incumbent upon everybody, not just one man, to achieve the goals that we were talking about earlier that you want to achieve. It's now is more important than ever to let these voters know that we haven't gotten astray. We have not gone astray. We're on the right path. Nobody's perfect. Look, we're even trying to hold them accountable.
No, you said something critical. And I don't know if this is, I don't want to get into psychologizing, but Donald Trump does listen.
He does.
Which is unique because we've had administration after administration that's pursuing an agenda and was really interested in persuading me whatever it was that I felt or believed. And so, if you're listening and you're viewing and you have concerns, you got to be full-throated about this. You can write the White House. You can, this is, and you said another thing, this is critical also because we got the precinct strategy which is this kind of straight line way to do something in the party and to spread the party. But you said, talk to your friends, your neighbors, your co-workers, your children, your parents. Politics, a vote is like a thermometer. It tells you what's going on at that day. But what it's really measuring is the human will, our collective wills at that moment. And our
Yes.
collective wills, we have a president that can feel, can sense in a very kind of unusual, I think, kind of an unusual way. He can sense the zeitgeist of the times and knows how to use that. I think we can be very influential in pushing back. And there are people that are prominent in this movement that are full-throated in opposing some of this. And I support that. And I'm going to tell you, Royce is one of them. You know, I want to tell you right here in Minnesota, so you know. So the party has erected yet again a seal here to run against Royce, because the last thing the party wants is for Royce to become the most important politician in Minnesota. Because, you know, we have the House Majority Whip here in Minnesota. So there's a natural tension, because if Royce was to succeed, he'd be the man. So they're running a seal, and I've, you know, been critical of him because he's a seal. I don't want to elect, hey, if you're a hammer, every problem's a nail. And I say, he might be the greatest guy in the world. I don't know him, but I'm not going to take a chance on it. And he seems to have a problem with the truth, kind of a difficulty with it, which is something I don't want in any politician. But here in Minnesota, Royce has been so supportive of Donald Trump. And he's been very influential in that community, that inner city community of opening people's minds to the MAGA movement.
Yeah.
And we're not getting any traction with the party because the constabulary here has got him pushed down. And here's what they say. And I'm Jewish. And we're best friends. He's an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
So they're using his willingness to talk about AIPAC. When he ran, and listen, you'll love this. This is the same Star Tribune. When he announced in 2022 to run for Omar's seat, he used the word globalism. That same Star Tribune said that was a dog whistle for anti-Semitism. Isn't that classic? That's how far we've come, though, since 22. Right?
It's unfortunate that there are now some on the right who have taken to these very same tactics. If you have the audacity to criticize, I don't want to say, because I know it's not everybody in the Republican Party, but there is a very real leftover component of Bushism and the concept of neoconservatism. For people who don't know honestly what that means, it means that they believe that in the primacy of U.S. power to shape the world in the image of the United States, or what it what the world the United States wants to create. And Israel obviously is a key component in that because they are an ally in the Middle East. So if you have any, if you have any criticism. If you level any criticism whatsoever at those ideas, you're now an anti-Semite as well. I mean, that's why I'm sure that Royce is getting that thrown at his way, because you said he criticizes AIPAC. Well, Republicans have been criticizing organizations like CARE for years, and they didn't like it when people would use the word xenophobic or Islamophobic, because they had the audacity to criticize an organization that they felt was masquerading as a civil rights organization, but really was an unregistered foreign agent, seeking to do, lobby on behalf of the interest of this government or that Arab government or whatever. And they did not like it when people on the left called them, xenophobic or Islamophobic. Now the right is doing the same thing to some of their own. And if you criticize AIPAC, or if you criticize Netanyahu or the Likud party in any way, you're being called an anti-Semite. And that's tragic because, it does have a very real cost. You have certain communities in Minnesota as well. In a state Donald Trump did win, it's very easy for me to underscore the harm that it's already done, right? Which is the state of Michigan, for instance. You had Dearborn. Donald Trump actually won a city. The mayor of Dearborn Heights, who was a prominent community leader in the Lebanese community, he endorsed Donald Trump. They did so because they wanted peace. They wanted somebody who was a peacemaker. They cited the Abraham Accords. That's not what they got, did they? They wanted somebody who didn't just knee-jerk take Israel's side and understood that the loss of human life is tragic no matter who they are. It doesn't matter if they're Palestinian, Lebanese, Israeli, doesn't matter. Human life is human life.
I do want to say though, and we covered it on the on the podcast. Donald Trump did deliver an epic speech in Saudi Arabia to the leaders of
He
the
did.
Islamic. I mean, it was
He
his
did.
opening
Yes.
bid was, "I'm not here to tell you how to live," and this American exception. This goes back to Jimmy Burns in '46. This idea that America is going to shape the world to its will, and he just said, "Look, I'm not here to do that. You can
Yep.
you can run any kind of game you want to. Let's just do business and let's seek peace." And I'm going to
Yep.
ask you, and I this is something we don't know, and I don't know. And when I make an opinion or I'm just speculating, something seems to have happened between that speech and the bombing of those nuclear facilities in Iran. It feels like there was a sea change. Something changed Donald Trump's mind. So it
Yeah,
feels that way to me. And I mean, I'm just making up meaning to try to explain how we went from, trying to de-escalate the Ukraine to now we're arming the Ukraine, and it's not clear to me how those weapons are going to get there. Now, he said the Europeans were going to pay for it. 13 European countries came out yesterday and said, "No, we're not."
First of all, that was one of the most ridiculous claims. Obviously, if it's going through NATO, it doesn't even matter if those countries are paying their share because we pay an outsized share of NATO. So even under the original design of NATO, it really was a ridiculous argument. I don't know how he was considering that he was going to be able to claim that they were going to pay and we were going to pay nothing. That's even more ludicrous to me because, of course, that's not going to happen unless he takes something from them to force them to do it. And right now, can he afford to do that at all? He needs all the help he can get. He's dealing with trade negotiations, or he doesn't need all the help he can get, but he doesn't need to ruffle any feathers unnecessarily over an issue like this and upset people that he's already trying to deal with on other levels, whether it's trade or even now this situation in the Middle East. Yeah, I just want to, again, I just want to point out when it came something, I feel like something changed as well, but he went to that speech in Saudi Arabia, which was textbook realism for people who don't know, the difference between internationalism and realism. I'm sure people do who are listening to this program. That's textbook realism. And then he fast forward a couple of weeks and we get to what happened in Israel. And to people, that isn't what they voted for because that is not realism. I mean, there was I know no realists, prominent realists like Amir Scheimer, who all of these people will cite. I know of no prominent realist who would argue that a preemptive strike against a country that does not pose a vital national security threat to you at that moment is justified. Nobody would argue that. And that was the situation that we were facing. Yes,
it was Mark Levin. Mark Levin was going on Fox News with the most strident propagandist, in my opinion.
Yeah, me too. I believe
their entire military budget is $9 billion a year. They lose that much money every month at the Pentagon. Just gets robbed, right? So Iran is not a threat to the United States of America. And to take the Republican Party, particularly people in my cohort, and stir them up that we are facing a threat from intercontinental ballistic missiles carrying nuclear tips from Iran is preposterous. And but then this goes to show you, if you tell the same lie long enough, which is Goebbels' comment, you can convince people of a lot. Unfortunately, that's why we say on this podcast here, and you're always welcome to come back, we're searching for truth here, and we're not afraid to tell the truth. And I really have been, and I've been saying for months, I'm not too happy with some of this stuff, but I don't want to be critical because I don't know what the punchline is. So I don't want to be, and pundits always have to have something to say. I'm plenty willing to say I don't know, and I'm waiting to see. I'm not on somebody's payroll where I have to be a prognosticator. I'm just trying to look at, wow, there's been a change. Well, if there's been a change, maybe there could be another change. I would like to believe that this set of ideas that Donald Trump has really coalesced, because those ideas were there before he showed up. The anti-war movement is MAGA. You know, that's beautiful. Maybe he can pivot back. Maybe he's negotiated. I mean, but I have a lot of negative things to say now, because I agree with you. That bombing ensures that the Iranians are going to go for a nuclear weapon. It's their only move to maintain their regime. So we now have, we've guaranteed that they're going to develop a nuclear capability. Guaranteed it. For example, and when you put a 50-day deadline on the Russians for those kind of secondary sanctions, what's he going to do in 50 days if Putin tells him to pound sand? I mean,
he'll have, and I think we know this from, knowing Trump now as both as an actual president and as a campaigner. He's not going to blink. So, then this is the problem with, I think, the game that he's playing. And this is what worries me, because you do have people, they give him, like I said, they give him a lot of latitude, but things are starting to pile up now. Questions are starting to pile up, and they're becoming too many situations where the risk of escalating, right? I think, and I'll just be honest, personally, I think that the president showed a lot of restraint, because I know that the pressure on him to do a lot more in Iran, for instance, was a lot worse. I know the pressure on him to do more in Eastern Europe is a lot worse than we're being led to believe. It's difficult to be in his position and constantly listen to those war drums, which is, they have this down to a science, folks. They know how to pressure White Houses into doing things. So I do think he's exercising restraint. The problem is they're now beginning to get him in a position where the threat of escalating or things getting out of control is coming from multiple places. This happened, by the way, to the Kennedy administration. He was basically, being there were sieges from all sides, whether it was Cuba or Asia. And it just became a situation where, one little escalation here and there and could lead to something full blown. And that's what happened to Vietnam. And it's another reason we could learn a lot from the Kennedy administration. It's another reason why I did not think it was wise, to use a symmetrical response strategy when it comes to Iran, because we've seen this before, and eventually you just see one side ups the ante, the other side has to up the ante. Now he's deploying the same strategy in Eastern Europe, and Putin is not. I mean, Putin is at a point where he's been fighting a war for a couple of years now that I don't know how, listeners would feel about this, but again, most realists would say that NATO is the aggressor. We put the bulwark, the satellite state, on their border. They did not do that to us. If they did it to, for instance, across the border in Niagara Falls, and they were sitting right over there, in our neighbors, took a chunk out of Canada, our neighbors of the north, and would we just sit blindly and let them, have that satellite state on our border? Of course we wouldn't, right? So I don't know how many realists would argue that Putin did, provoke this conflict. So if you're Putin and you're engaged in this conflict for a couple of years, you can't just give it back. He's that would be incredibly difficult position.
That'd be the end of him in Russia.
It's over for him if he gives them. Yes, he's got to at least take the Donbass at the very least, and he's got to exit. His exit strategy has got to be one that includes looking strong and looking like he did. He faced down the West, and they got what they wanted, and they moved on. And this is what worried me about that situation. The longer that it persisted, the more it would change Putin's calculus, and the more of Ukraine he would need to justify taking in order to back out of there peacefully. And contrary to what a lot of people say in Western media, it's one of the worst propagandists out there. Russia is not a weak country. They're not. They've actually showed a great deal of restraint. So I hope that continues to be the case. I think we're getting a little bit lazy and a little bit complacent, And so there are just too many of us who are willing, or at least on the pundit side of this. I don't think that's true of people. People don't want armed conflict with Russia. The American public does not have the resolve for it. So when I say people, I actually mean the pundit class. I don't think they appreciate how devastating a conflict between great powers can be.
I think
They
James
haven't
Baker.
been around for one.
I think James Baker, if memory serves correctly, who was the uh, in the Reagan administration in the State Department. He was the head of the State Department. I think he said, if I remember correctly, my job is to wake up every day and make sure we don't go to war with Russia.
Right.
And how we could go from that orientation, and that was a very globalist administration, but to go from that kind of foreign policy orientation to just openly, since the 90s, and I agree with you. I've gone into great depth on this. I say this all the time. Britain attacked Russia in 1805. France attacked Russia in 1812. Britain attacked again in 1853. The Germans attacked in 1917. We had 13,000 American troops in Vladivostok when the revolution happened. The West went in there. 42, Operation Barbarossa, the Germans, the Cold War, now this war.
Yep.
It's not that the Russians haven't been doing their own skullduggery, but this is the great game of Europe. And the whole point of America was to get out of this mess, was to obviously people came here and piggybacked on the people that ran away, but the original people that came here were trying to escape that kind of monarchical great game. And, well, we've reproduced it here again. So we're embroiled in something that is really not Republican as a philosophy. It is
right. I think that's it. And I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to make sure that I do say this because I keep forgetting to say them now every opportunity. That isn't Republicanism. And that has been the reason that Trump has had the success that he's been trying to bring that back. And so when some people who are Trump's defenders, and God love them. I mean, they're doing what they feel is best, I'm sure. When they defend him, regardless of whatever he does without criticism, they're actually damaging and hindering his ability to be a more popular and more successful president. And then what does that mean? Well, Republicans in the future have got to win over voters, certain voting groups that he won that they failed to win, which we started the show with. There are a lot more examples that can go around the map, and we could just knock them down one by one. And by the way, your congressional districts in your state, especially the southeastern part of the state, he completely outruns these traditional Republicans in your part of the state. So the longer we continue with this, I usually call it an identity crisis. The longer that Republicans as a party persist with this identity crisis, the more they procrastinate being able to bring these voters into the fold. And we're at a point now where I understand they want to defend their guy, but we're at a point now where, the hour's getting late. He will not be on the ballot again. And these voters are out there wondering and looking at events and saying to themselves, what is going on here? And when it comes time to vote for Republican candidates and he's not on that ballot, it's going to be a very difficult time convincing them that the party's candidates down ballot are worth the trust the way that they put into him. And by the way, he did great getting out voters that we were talking about that are lower propensity. He did great, but there were more. There are a lot more. And had Republicans gotten them out in 24, their congressional gains would have been much, much bigger, and they didn't. So I don't know why would be miring ourselves in this conversation. I thought we were pretty much past this debate. Now it should be all about motivating and what's the best way to reach these people and bring them into the fold.
Do you think this new media, like we're doing here, this podcast medium, is helpful to reach these low and no propensity voters?
I do, and and the reason why, you're educating people on what they could be doing as well, and there are other programs that have demonstrated that they can make a difference. So I think the more widespread, and in Minnesota, you need one of these because again,
We're here. We're here, baby.
It's been ignored for too long. And
We
I
want
mean,
all the help. Look, we're sitting at the coffee
I think
shop.
it's essential what
Help
you're doing.
me. I'm asking
Yeah.
for help. I mean, I want you to come back. I want to make a relationship with you. I would like to get together with you. And here's what the audience needs to understand. The data that Richard generates is watched by the administration. So this polling data, that's the feedback loop of us answering these polls honestly and
Yes.
participating, because the data then gets into the administration. That's the feedback from the street. I mean, of course, there's people like Bannon, he's listened to, but the man in the street is more important than any of the pundits.
That's
And
right.
so the aggregation of this data is what Richard is collecting. So when he says we need to speak back, we need to be forceful in our pushback, he's going to collect that data. It's going to go back to the administration. And that is how Donald Trump can analyze where he's at and push back again. And this is something that you and I understand. I don't think people understand it. First of all,
And I know,
it's the fog of war for him. I mean, you get tired. And I know this
Yes.
happens for you too.
Yes,
You've got to
sure.
constantly come up with content and ideas, and you wake up one day and you go, man, I don't even know what's going on today. I got to figure this out. Well, he's sitting in that chair and he's being hammered on, and it's a mile a minute every minute, and he's doing the best he can, I'm sure. I know he is. And he errs, and that's when what you're saying is the people that brought him to the dance have to hold him accountable to why we brought him to the dance. And that is the data you're going to aggregate, and he's going to see it. Is that a true statement?
Yeah, that what you just said was 100% true and so valuable that you said it. Starting with the beginning, folks, if you get called by a pollster, I know that maybe you don't trust them. If they want 5 or 10 minutes of your time, give it to them. It doesn't matter if it's me or anybody else. Please give them that time, because if you, and this is a major problem we've had in the industry, if a certain group of people decide that they're not going to participate in them, then when the polls come out and they look really bad for you, you can't really complain, because we have a lot of groups that are just wholly opting out of trying to participate. It makes the job very difficult.
You could
So,
even
in
say
other
this is
words,
an act of self-governance now
yes,
to make
it is.
everybody needs to hear that,
That's
self-governance.
actually in our pitch. That's actually in our pitch when we call people. We actually say that in our pitch. So please, that it's our way of saying, please give us 10 minutes with your opinion is valuable to us, because this is your chance to have your voice heard. And that comes with assurances that we promise we will accurately reflect them, because there are people who simply don't think that their real opinion will be conveyed properly. So we do that. And then again, what the second part of what you said is that they do digest this work. There's only a few people that they trust. And when, if you, it's important that you make your views known to people like me, because they're going to see it. I mean, this is rare. Joe Biden didn't do this. Barack Obama didn't do this. Bush didn't do this. Presidents don't care like this, and he does. And we're incredibly, the word's blessed. We're blessed to have a situation where the president will literally want to hear what you think. I mean, that's
the buried lead. What
unique.
the buried lead is, Richard is on the list of people that is doing polling.
Yeah, I kind of did bury that lead.
You did, but I want the audience to know it. And Richard, can you give everybody your socials? Because I want everybody to follow you. Give us your socials. So everybody get out your pencil and write this down. Go
And
ahead.
If you
please.
forget the pencil, I have it in the description, guys. So.
Oh, okay. Tanner's going to put it. Thank you, Tanner. Go ahead, Richard.
Thanks,
Just
Tanner.
let wrap it down.
Yeah, I mean, we're everywhere, but the best place to make it simple on everybody is on Locals. That's the central hub for all things People's Pundit, peoplespundit.locals.com. Even if you wanted to go to the Public Polling Project, which is, again, it's our way to try to reform the polling industry. That's on Big Data Poll, but all you have to do is go to locals, and locals will have the links there, and you can learn about, the various things that we do and engage with the community, because locals is a community. Yeah, really appreciate you guys having me on, and I'd love to come back. I mean, we had some time today, but we scratched the surface.
If you'll come back, I'll be blessed, because what I really want, and I'm going to ask you, and this is what you have to do in politics. You got to be bold. The worst thing that you can do is get slapped. Somebody says no. I'm asking for your help in Minnesota. Yeah. We've got a tight budget here with Royce White, which is no surprise to you, because he's not going to get any institutional support. And I've got to find the right issues that are going to create a coalesced unity, because he's great. I'm going to tell you, you don't know him. I'd like you to meet him. He's great. He could be really important to the future of this movement, and he needs people like you to invest in him. I've invested. I mean, Bannon has really tried to help him, because he is a unique intellect, and he's there's this thing they talk about, it was like Kramer on Seinfeld. When Royce walks into the room, he can actually light it up and make everybody feel good just walking in. And we just need to take that light.
That's a gift. Yep. That's a gift.
He's just great in a crowd, and he's got the physical presence, but he's got the intellect to make a difference. And, the Republican Party of Minnesota is going to get this podcast rammed right up their ass, because what they're doing, Tanner's going to edit that out, but what they're trying to do is what we've always done, which is lose. They're unwilling to try anything different. And they just keep reproducing the same playbook, and it's just a failure.
And I know how frustrating that is. I've been obviously been dealing with that in Minnesota, but it is, I think we all have stories like this, that they just are on, a rinse and repeat cycle. And it's very difficult to break that cycle. And it doesn't matter if they lose, they ignore, they shirk accountability, they escape accountability, they ignore criticisms, they take the tiny wins where they get them as an affirmation that they're doing something right, even though these are not big wins, and usually have nothing to do with how they run the game. It's usually organic. And then we get into the same cycle all over again. Warn them, this isn't going to work. That person is not the right candidate. They lose. That candidate loses. We try the I told you so moment. It doesn't happen. They ignore it. And it just keeps this maddening cycle over and over again. It has to be broken. And that's why really it started last presidential cycle, where I decided, you know what, the only way to stop this is to change the electorate, because it's something they can't even control. And again, we can talk more about that, in the future.
Richard,
they can't control that.
But you're talking to a person. I have dedicated the rest of my life to that kind of cultural change. I believe in it. I'm working for it. I think we're good at what we're doing, but we have football fields of improvement to make. And this connection I have with you, I'm going to try to develop it. You're welcome back. I'm going to call you after this, and try to establish a real personal relationship. And that's another thing. Politics is personal. I mean, it's peer to peer, and you want to work. You want to work with people you like. And I've really enjoyed listening to you. And I want to thank you so much for coming on. And I hope you come back soon. And I wish you Godspeed. And I think my audience is really getting a benefit from having you spend your time with us. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
I appreciate that and look forward to it. All the best. Thanks for having me.
Good to meet you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tanner. Thank you very much. Everybody, have a good night.
Thank you, Richard. Oh,
Take
you
care,
took my
Tanner.
lightning, bro.
Go ahead.
Have a good night, everybody.
There you go. Thank you. Good night, all.
Everything's up on the bar. We're all in. We get to decide. Do you want to live on your knees, or do you want to die on your feet fighting? That's the decision you get to make now.